Hey everybody, this video today is not sponsored by anyone. It's just me and you, and today we're talking about beginning a book. The very beginnings of an idea. How do you take it and capture it and get that idea on paper? How do you begin as a writer? How do you begin as a beginning writer? How do you begin as a senior who's just starting out writing? These are some of the things we're going to look at today. I hope you'll stay tuned. Back right now in a minute. So let's just address the elephant in the room straight off from the first crack on the bat. Everybody thinks, oh, I'll write a book. I'll write an ebook and I'll put it up on Amazon for Kindle and I'll make $1 million. Everybody thinks that, but that is not where you should begin as a beginner. The first place you should begin as a beginning author is with the idea. What is it you want to write? What idea do you have that you want to expound upon and share with others? And is that idea big enough to encompass an entire novel if it's for fiction? Or is it big enough to carry through an entire book if it's nonfiction? Is your idea big enough? Is it strong enough? Here's how you can know. To start, we'll look at fiction. And these are the things that I think a beginning fiction author should know to decide if their idea will work for an entire 400-page novel. Now, let me preface this with saying there's a lot of books already written on the subject. There's a lot of YouTube videos probably out there on this subject. There's plenty of podcasts, I'm certain, on this subject. So if you've already listened to a spiel about, how to expound your ideas and turn them into a novel and whether it's a good enough idea, if you've already heard this, you're welcome to turn the video off at this point. But if not, stay tuned because I think you might hear something very interesting. Well, to avoid sounding like Maria in The Sound of Music, you do have to begin at the very beginning. The very beginning is take your idea and figure out if it has the accoutrements for a beginning, a middle, and an end. And to be really honest, sometimes fiction writers start with the ending. If they know where they're going, they have a kind of a guidepost to aim toward, it makes it easier to write the rest. That may not be you, and that's fine if it's not. It's certainly fine if you don't want to start at the ending for your beginning as a beginning writer. It is perfectly fine. But you do have to have some things in place to know whether this is going to work for you or not. You have to have characters. You have to have a plot. You have to have something for the characters to do. You have to have some place for the characters to end up. And if you've got that, that's a very good beginning. I taught a few classes of high school English teaching creative writing. And the first thing I did was I taught them how to build a story. And I would say, okay, somebody come up with a character, and somebody would say, it's a teenage girl, and somebody else would say it's a farmer's daughter, and somebody else would say it's a fireman's wife. Anything like that. Just throw some things on a piece of paper, just some ideas of who the main character is going to be. If you have an idea, you probably already know who the main character is going to be, but take that main character and give them a life. Where do they live? What do they do for a living? What's their favorite foods? Just give them personality, build them up. Write all this stuff down. Build yourself a little bit of a characterization sheet and try to understand who these people are first. There should be a character, there should be a villain. There should always be a villain. There should always be a protagonist, somebody who comes against our main character and causes life to be difficult for them. And sometimes there's a sidekick character or a mentor character, somebody that kind of guides them on their journey. And yeah, to me, all fiction is just about the journey. And Y'all can argue with me. Maybe it's about other things for other people, but that's it for me. So start at the beginning with your character. Figure out who these paper people are, figure out what they're doing, figure out what's keeping them from getting to where they want to go. And, that will give you a lot towards building the plot. And while you're building that plot, you'll figure out a lot about the character. Well, now I know I said protagonist, but I meant antagonist. There's always a main character, there's always an antagonist. There's that person that they come up against. I had to clarify that because that would be a little confusing if I let that go and didn't clarify it. So there you go. Antagonist, word for the day. We have our beginning. We have our character. We have the story about the character. We know what the character wants. We know why they can't have it. We know who the villain is or the antagonist. We know the mentor or the sidekick character, and this might be a best friend kind of scenario. It depends on the story. And that's a great place to begin. That's a wonderful beginning. But you have to also be able to move all of these people and the setting and the story all the way through a book. That means that there's rising and falling action throughout. And that's critical because nobody wants to read straight dialogue. Nobody wants to read straight exposition. Nobody wants to read anything that doesn't give them a reason to turn the page. So note to beginning authors, make the reader turn the page. Even in romance, they've got to worry that this couple's not going to end up together. There has to be something that makes the reader worry. So be sure and put that in your notes as well. Now, for you beginning nonfiction writers, I don't have a lot of advice for you. I've only written one nonfiction piece about how to get your book written. And it was based on my own experience. You can get that at Amazon. It's called 10 Tips for Getting That Book Written. But to me, a nonfiction author, the beginning of writing nonfiction, I think, is research. I think you really, really have to research your subject. If you're going to say write a book on how to get a book written, you got to know all of the accoutrements that go with writing a book. Everything that I was just speaking of, the characters, setting. What if it's a historical story? Maybe you're doing a nonfiction on a historical event. You've got to know a lot about that historical event. You got to know who the players are, who was there, what happened to them, was it a successful outcome? You've got to know all the history behind that. So research is kind of critical if you're a nonfiction beginning writer. So y'all be sure and get your notes down correctly, because believe me, I've heard it said time and time again, nonfiction authors are held to a certain standard, if you will. And when they don't meet the standard that their readers expect, they can get some really nasty reviews. And you don't want that to happen. There's no reason for that. So beginning writers for nonfiction, get out there and do the research. And I know that this has been a kind of a whirlwind video on beginning writers and writing the beginnings of a novel or a nonfiction book. And there's so much more that could be said, but I'm trying to keep these videos short. So in conclusion, remember, if you want to write a fiction novel, which saying fiction and novel at the same time sounds really redundant. If you want to write a novel, you should sit down with pen and paper or get on your computer and develop characters. And you got to do setting. You got to have a place for them to live. You got to have something for them to do, something that goes wrong. You've got to have people in their life. They got to have family. They got to have friends. They got to have a church society. They've got to have, internet friends, whatever it is. They can't be an island. They got to have people in their life, and they've got to have something that they've got to overcome. That's just a novel. If you don't believe me, go out there and read a few of them. That's kind of critical too, you guys. Writers should be readers. That's my opinion. Fight me on it. But there you go. In conclusion, get out there, write down some stuff, take your idea, develop it into a really interesting story, and then just start writing. Start writing. You're never, ever, ever going to go anywhere if you don't get started. That goes for fiction. That goes for nonfiction. Till next time, y'all be sweet.